Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025, and on Wednesdays we deal with emotional well-being and relationships. Tom Petty, some of you probably know, the late great Tom Petty, rock guitarist, songwriter. Had a lot of excellent songs, but one of them is a song called Wildflowers, and he repeats this simple line multiple times throughout the songs, kind of singing to his lover or former lover, "You belong among the wildflowers." And I think of the gentle soul about whom he's writing and singing, and this imagery of growing freely among the wildflowers. And in nature, of course, the flower doesn't think about competing with the surrounding flowers and all that sort of thing, but just blooms naturally with sunlight and nutrients and so forth. And would that we should all be like flowers in that sense, that blossom naturally in their environments, not because we're competing with others or seeking their attention or their validation or what have you, simply because of who we are. And here's the thing, as humans, we do a sort of a unique dance to balance out our internal capacities with our external environments in which we live. And that environment can at times help us flourish. At the other end of the spectrum can be altogether crushing. You've probably heard that while we can't control external events, we can control how we respond to those events or circumstances. And in terms of our own unique individual growth, the real power lies mostly within. In other words, we don't necessarily need recognition or approval or validation from anyone to grow. But that's a challenge because we all have egos. And since we do live amongst others, don't we prefer that people might be positive when they're speaking with us rather than negative? That they make positive comments rather than harsh comments? That they treat us kindly, certainly, rather than the opposite. And unless you've mastered Stoicism or similar types of philosophies that allow you to control your emotions to an extraordinary degree, you're probably going to be affected by the comments that people make, especially if they're people that are closer to you. That's pretty natural, pretty normal. But I want to consider this from an energy expenditure standpoint. Is it really worth expending your energy, your time and energy, in responding to insults that people might casually lob in your direction? In most cases, probably not. At least not unless there are some real material consequences or threats that you have to respond to. And I'd suggest the vast majority of the time, probably more than 90% of the time, you can simply ignore people's insensitive comments or criticisms. Now again, if they're well-meaning and well-intentioned and done in an appropriate fashion, you can certainly stand to benefit. But a lot of times, of course, the comments are just harsh for harshness' sake. People are mean because they're having a bad day or because they're stunted in their own growth or whatever the underlying cause is. So one crucial life hack then is to minimize your attention and your involvement with those who would drain your energy. I mean, given a choice, we'd rather be surrounded by positive rather than negative people. And so reduce your contact and your involvement with those who would, or with that which drains your energy. I love these two lines from the Jan Arden song, "Can I Be Your Girl?" You may know the song, some of you. She sings, "He is the bitter wind who's drying up your appetite. He is the darkness that seeps into your fading light." So protect yourself by minimizing your exposure to negative, hurtful, or hostile people. Insulate yourself from the unnecessary emotional dramas and the self-defeating habits like endless media scrolling. To what end? Or anything that drains you of your precious energy. Conversely, invest in that which helps you to improve yourself, from listening to interesting talks, any type of real learning, to enhancing important relationships with others. In addition, you have to develop your ability to set boundaries and protect your energy. Work to identify and when you should say no to distractions. Avoid toxic environments to the extent that you can and disengage from the so-called emotional vampires. And if possible, steer clear of anyone who would seemingly thrive by consuming your vital energies, and especially without any reciprocal benefits. Now, for example, when I was 19, I took a job at a pool building company, and I worked as a laborer, and I worked with a small crew that went out to build these backyard pools. And the guys I work with, they spent the entire day basically, I mean, I'm exaggerating to an extent, but they spent the entire day basically tossing around F-bombs, every other sentence, or they would talk, their main focus was on getting hammered after work, or talking about, usually in disparaging or demeaning ways, talking about women, okay? Or they'd spend an inordinate amount of time talking about what they'd like to do with this or that female, sexually or otherwise. In short, I tried to brush this stuff off because that wasn't really appealing. I didn't find it particularly interesting. And I realized, though, that there really wasn't much I could do. And so I absolutely had to get out of that job for my own well-being. And so most of us, from time to time may encounter folks along the way, people at our jobs, at school. We might actually even work in, like I was just describing, kind of a toxic environment. And I would even suggest for myself, even though I work at a university all these years later, I'd say that the university, as a large-scale organization, of course, well, like any large-scale organization, has a diverse array of different people. And if I could put it in a more sophisticated way, at my university, like universities everywhere, we sort of have our share of what we sophisticated academics like to refer to as a-holes. But lest you think I'm being too harsh, I use the term a-hole just as kind of a shorthand way to talk about someone who's generally obnoxious or irritating or insensitive. But let's be honest, sometimes I've been the a-hole in the room, at least on occasion, and maybe you too. So, yet there are definitely, as I say, to some degree, we have these problems at our university. And as I suspect in most workplaces, again, unless you're in a very small, affirmative environment where you're, maybe it's your own business and you've got a couple of people that you work with, those sorts of things. And don't misunderstand me. I'm quite grateful and blessed to have worked where I have for the last over 2 decades now. There are many colleagues and administrators and professors and staff and students, of course, who are fantastic people. In fact, I'd suggest that 90+% of the people that I come into contact with are great people, or fine people, or people that I could happily work with, or have lunch with, or whatever. And yet, at the same time, there are a few folks that are the a-holes, shall we say, in the room. But I don't let these folks sour my days at work, my opportunities to teach, to do the research that I love. Instead, I set boundaries. Mostly, I just avoid wasting my time with people who are constantly complaining or attacking or bullying others, or who are, for whatever reasons, just deeply unpleasant or troubled individuals. And when I do encounter those folks, I still try to just smile, be pleasant, and mostly just keep moving. In short, I try not to let myself get sucked into their dramas or become a card-carrying member of a certain clique, for example, especially ones that like to just rant about or disparage others and that they don't like and put them down and that sort of thing. To be fair, I'm quite certain some of them that I run into don't like me either. That's quite natural. Again, it might be a byproduct of positions that I've taken over the years. I've been a chair, I've been a dean or associate dean. Obviously, I've been a professor for 20, some years at this institution. And I've worked with the union, I've worked with the administrators, I've worked on the contracts and so on. So you can appreciate, I've done just a little bit of just about everything at the university. And over the course of those many years, sometimes you're going to butt heads with people. And sometimes there may be, sort of residual effects, and people just don't like each other all the time. What I find disconcerting, though, are when people judge me by standards that, all of us ostensibly try to avoid judging others by, whether you're talking about their statuses, their background, their gender, these sorts of things. But I've actually heard people say, and directly in my presence, not directly to me personally, but directly in my presence, that, that something is problematic because I'm an older white male, or this is the older white male thinking. And I, guilty as charged. I am an older white male. That's a fact. And at the same time, to me, when you start putting people into these different groups as such and putting them down for that because of their status, then that just is another form of tribalism. And it seems that most people need to have their tribes. Okay, so I found over the years then that many people seem to be trapped in their own worlds of grievances and hostility and probably deep hurt and pain that hasn't allowed them to sort of rise above or beyond, or they haven't been able to see beyond the limits of their own experience. And indeed, they continue to struggle for a variety of reasons in their own lives. So I try to be empathetic to the extent that I can, or to the extent that I'm going to be working with or encountering such people along the way. But at the same time, I have to make a self-conscious decision, maybe you too, to limit my engagement with such folks. And so in that sense, we all have to set boundaries, and including mental boundaries. Spend as little time worrying about our beloved a-holes, those that we encounter. Spend as little time as possible. Don't waste your mental energy thinking about them and their dramas, and don't let them drain you of your emotional energy, even though they've said something insulting or they've slighted you in some way. And here's another important life hack. Try to avoid gossip, at least for the most part. I mean, if there are important things being said or useful information to be acquired through gossip, something that can have a real impact on your life and well-being or those that you love or whatever, that might be an exception. But if mostly people are just getting on about disparaging others or belittling people or bullying or whatever, there's not much there to really help lift you up. Even if you're thinking, wow, such and such really is an a-hole, I agree. Well, that's still wasted energy. It's not going to get you anywhere. And so minimize that kind of noise in your life and in your mind to the best of your ability. Conversely, where do we all do much better? Where do we tend to thrive? When we spend our time with, or we're surrounded by people who are more affirming of us, who have more positive attitudes or positive approaches to life in general. And especially if we're blessed to have others in our lives who directly support and inspire us. Most of us do. And that's perhaps my main message today then, to practice mindfulness in being aware of where you are directing your energies. Also, being self-conscious about protecting your energies. So we all need to direct and protect our precious stores of energy. And we need to develop habits then that allow us to renew and expend our energies in positive ways. Sometimes that requires making tough decisions. Sometimes we have to avoid others or even end certain toxic relationships. We cannot avoid certain people, especially the toxic folks at work or at home. We can at least endeavor to minimize our contact with such people and minimize the mental energy that we expend in worrying about such people. Or again, if you will, being able to deflect and rethink what they've said so as not to allow it to have a negative impact on us. Sometimes we should just bite our lip and remain silent. In fact, maintaining silence often can be viewed as a positive, depending on the context. if you can, avoid always trying to prove yourself or to seek validation or to be right in every exchange. Simply by speaking your mind. You don't necessarily have to speak your mind. Silence, of course, can be a powerful message in and of itself, especially as a symbol of one's own self-control, confidence, and even wisdom at times. Sometimes we need to say no, even if that means disappointing others. The obverse, in other words, saying yes to unimportant distractions or to toxic people, drains us of our energy as well. So, for example, binge watching a Netflix series might deprive us of much needed sleep. Going out at night to get hammered with friends may be a positive in the moment, but similarly, it can have an adverse effect as well, especially the next day. Excuse me. So, in sum, the important choices we all need to make involve letting go of the distractions and the people, to some extent, who undermine our growth or, in worst cases, poison our wells of energy. We have to learn to let go or to practice detachment rather than indulging the toxic people and the mind-numbing distractions that add no real value to our lives. Most important of all, choose where you think you can and should be focusing your attention and therefore your energy. And there's a common expression then that summarizes this principle. Energy flows to where your attention goes. Energy flows to where your attention goes. If you want to accomplish anything meaningful, truly useful, or just interesting in your life, you have to focus your attention and energy accordingly. That requires self-conscious reflection or meditation and deliberately training your brain to focus on what's important. If you struggle on this front, and many of us do, well, then here's a tip. Start with just one simple thing to which you can direct your focus in a new way. Pick something that's fun and interesting, or really anything that just challenges you to break free from your usual routines and commit to a new kind of focus. For example, you could sign up for Duolingo, start learning a new language, or sign up for an online course with Brilliant to freshen up your mathematics abilities or in some other field. They usually have, like with Duolingo and Brilliant, these sorts of things, they usually have 5 or 10-minute lessons that you can do each day, or you can do multiple. But if you just started doing one 5-minute session each day, that would be a huge shift in your daily habits. That would really be something. It's a great way of training your brain to focus. Or it can be something as simple as doing a set of basic exercises first thing in the morning, or keeping a pad and pen right next to your bed, waking up and writing down 3 things that you're grateful for each morning or each night before you go to bed. A simple habit, a simple routine, something different. Again, it can be just about anything, but something that has some positive effect. Something that you can see, that you want to do, that fills up your cup as opposed to draining your cup. Okay, so again, whatever that might be, you choose. You decide what little habit, what little focus you want to direct your attention to each day. A short thing. Even something, this is going to sound silly, but it's a true one. It's a true story. So I did something about 5 years ago that really has had a life-changing effect on me. I was never a big flosser, with the teeth, and never a big exfoliator. My wife thinks I need to exfoliate more. So anyway, I don't want to, reach my deathbed and say I should have exfoliated more. But with respect to the flossing issue, we spent 5 years ago or so, actually a little over 5 years now, but we spent a week in England with my brother-in-law, who's a dentist, and his beautiful wife. And we had a great time. And so I decided to, we talked about all sorts of things. And at some point, the conversation turned to dentistry and oral health and so on and so forth. So I learned a lot. I mean, I knew a lot of what he was talking about, but we had some really deep conversations, and I kind of, got to the next level in terms of my understanding, from a dental perspective and maintenance perspective and so forth. And guess what? I took his advice on the matter and I started flossing regularly. And at first, it was a bit of a hassle. I had to really commit to it, but I started flossing every night before I'd go to bed. Now, maybe you already do that. Good on you. I was a little bit slow in that regard, slow on a lot of things. But I actually got into the habit, and now I quite enjoy flossing. Go figure, right? Something I'd always hated now has become something that I kind of miss not doing. I don't like to miss flossing, like my favorite TV show or something. In short, the point is self-consciously focus your attention and your energy on one specific and one new thing in some simple way. And that can be your starting point. Proving to yourself that you can do this one day at a time. So that's the first step. Same thing applied to when I used to be a runner. I'd always loved sports and athletics in general, but I never really tried to be a competitive runner, that sort of thing. And so I had to learn. I had to start slowly. I had to combine, walking and running in combination one day at a time, and then start to increase my running, the time and the distance spent, and so on and so forth. And eventually built up to and was able to run marathons and half marathons, that sort of thing. So it takes a long time to do these things, but you don't start, obviously, in one day. One of my favorite lines from a Dan Fogelberg song is, "Lifetimes can't be lived out in a day." So, and then what happens with any exercise routine or anything if we stick with it, right? We start getting habituated, and things start to become easier. We might even start enjoying the endeavor that was so painful before. Setting goals certainly can help, but the real goal is the continual pursuit of the new habit, the habituation process, and focusing our attention and energy in new and important ways. And with practice, of course, you can enhance your ability then to pay attention to the most important things in your life. And you can determine if you're directing your energy properly towards your life's mission. Or, as happens to all of us at times, are you sometimes finding yourself trapped or locked into cycles of stress or doubt or despair, or unable to break free from the past or those external sources or peoples who are draining or depleting you? If you are, don't feel bad. It's pretty commonplace. I'm sharing these ideas with you, and yet I'm still stuck at times too. I'll worry unnecessarily, for example, about something that I can't control, or lapse into an old habit that's not entirely healthy. Like, for example, one of my go-tos is when I get super stressed and I don't practice mindfulness or some of the other strategies that I talk about, I might sort of almost subconsciously, or without thinking about it, I'll start picking up and eating some junk food. So again, I'm not perfect with this stuff either. But like with my regular flossing, I'm way better than I used to be. And it just took me time and effort and practice. And a willingness to take a good, hard look at oneself and commit to making positive changes. And so therein lies the key to your long-term emotional health and well-being. First, we have to start by identifying those things that are keeping us from fulfilling our potential and draining us of our mental, emotional, and or physical energy. Second, we can then create an action plan to refocus our energy and break the unhealthy cycles, the unhealthy patterns of the past. Third, we can then develop new habits to replace those that allow us to regularly put that plan into action. And then finally, we have to create and recreate the conditions that will allow us to sustain the changes we're endeavoring to make. So sometimes that means quite literally changing one's environment. It might mean changing a job. It might mean, establishing a new relationship of some kind with someone. It can mean many things. So, but the point is that at some point we have to dance not just with ourselves, but we have to embrace that the environment in which we find ourselves. And so, in order to ensure our long-term healthy adaptation and success and change in our lives, yes, it starts at one level from within, but then we have to dance with others on the stage, and we have to figure out how to work with the environment or change the environments as well, to a certain extent, to the extent that we can. Okay, so focus for now. Focus your, I'm actually, next week's vlog, I'll address these 4 steps more systematically, one at a time. But before then, as I've suggested, just start with one new thing and establish one new habit or 5-minute routine that you can do every day. And so that's your homework if you're listening. Identify one thing that you'd like to do each day for fun, for learning, for dental health, whatever it is you'd like to do, and commit to that each day, 5 minutes, for 1 week. I know you can do that. So focus and direct your energy each day on that one thing for 5 minutes, that one new habit. And I can guarantee you that one focused 5-minute stretch each day will help build your confidence and help you to start getting to see what you can do. If you have doubts or you've been, hesitant about starting something, you will start to develop the habit of self-consciously monitoring what you're doing, and you may start to gain insight into what has been holding you back from sticking to a routine. In other words, you might start to identify why you're struggling, even with something that seems so simple. And that's a great start too. Okay, so until we meet again, especially in the follow-up to this vlog, I'd like to, as ever, express my thanks and my gratitude for your decision to spend some time with me today. And may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives and nurture love in your hearts. And I'm sending you a virtual hug today, whether you need one or not. And I'll see you next time.